like a voice that
Yeah.
Nice.
That's why it's smart to do it early, because otherwise you can't like sneak in recording later anymore.
Yeah.
You have to do it at the beginning, or otherwise you have
And
some
everybody gets a message that the meeting is being recorded, and you can leave it.
Yeah, exactly. The prototyping sessions have yielded some interesting results from the Zoom team. I'm not sure who approved this one, but sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't know who approves anything at Zoom. I feel like they really they could have improved their entire product so much, but instead they just, I don't know, they just made it worse.
I know what you mean. But cool. Welcome all. Good to see you guys. I see Alex, Dylan, Abe, Alva. Nice to see you. Carmen, Liz. Hey guys. Hi everybody. Steffi, looking great. Wonderful. Cool. A bunch of people here. Really excited to have Andre here today. Andre will have an introduction in a second from Deepwork. He's been around at office hours, so some of you might have met him if you were already trying to get into prototyping and user testing. But the main thing I want to say is this is the first session of week 2. And to set the stage for Andre and for everyone, we've kind of gotten to hang out basically for the first 2 weeks of the program. There's been a few things here and there that we try to share, some of these random modules where we talk about philosophy and some interesting things, but it's been mostly an exercise in getting to know each other. We've actually gotten to get together in person for the first time in New York City. I know Alex was there for that, and there was a good group of 25. There's some people getting together in London and Barcelona and in all of these places. Hopefully other people who are listening might be willing to start something in their own locale. And if you ever get a group of kernel fellows together for like a meal and want to send your ETH address to Sachin or I, we can help with just like funding those types of things. But long story short, people are starting to meet each other. That's great. That's kind of the first 2 weeks of the program. This is the first kind of like practical, okay, you've kind of locked down your adventure, is what we call it in kernel. And you have the idea for it. But how might you put that into a prototype of something that expresses the intention of what you want to build? And this is session kind of like the first part of that. Beginning of week 2, we have 6 weeks left in the program. So the hope is that, we have this week to kind of like really look deeply at what it means to prototype. There's of course people who are here who already have prototypes, who have already done user testing. So for you guys, some of this might be remedial, but my instincts tell me that Andre will share something that you haven't necessarily done. You might have heard of it before, but you probably aren't doing it in your current prototype. And that's why having Andre here to remind you is an incredible thing. And then for the people who want to go really deep, our hope is, this lasts about 30 minutes and we have some time for questions. And in between, we're going to drop a link for what we're calling cross-feedback user testing, which we hope starts basically right after this call, where, after this call, you hopefully have a prototype. It might be pen and paper. It might be something better than that, but you have a prototype that you feel good about. And if you sign up in this flow that Sachin will share, you will be paired with somebody else from the cohort for what we're calling a cross-user testing session, which will be an hour session where you share for 30 minutes and they share for 30 minutes. You each give each other feedback, and ideally, you explore your idea with somebody interesting in the cohort. So we'll do that setup. You just have to say, yes, I want to do it by following the flow that Sachin describes. But first, I want to pass the mic to Andre. We'll get through what is this whole prototype thing all about. And yeah, very thankful to have Andre here for one of 2 sessions with the Deepwork team.
Cool, thank you so much. Here is a screen share. I'll basically have a couple of slides that accompany what I'm going to be talking about, just because it makes it a little bit easier to watch and understand. And yeah, so the next, I guess, like 20 to 30 minutes I'll just be talking about a couple of stories and experience over the last 6 years in product design, and in particular with enterprises, startups, open source projects, pretty much anything. I've encountered pretty much any situation possible with any type of team. So if you have any questions afterwards, I really recommend coming around to the office hours, because obviously everyone's problem is going to be different, but this is more like a general understanding of product design and prototyping. From what I understand, we'll do one session especially on prototyping and product design today, and then next week I'll tell you a bit more about user testing in general, but after this one, yeah, you'll have space for yourself. I'll also, so yeah, I guess there's not that much to kind of else to say. So let's just get started right away. I think one of the first things that I think are very important to mention before you actually start prototyping, and this depends on the team and kind of who you work with, because some of you are solo, some of you have other teams or other team members. I generally don't do workshops, don't do any calls with more than one other person, pretty much ever, unless I'll do it as a workshop, or if it's just one person presenting information. So I really want to emphasize kind of the importance of workshops as a tool to decentralize your personal creative process. So if you're owning an idea, if you have a kind of an ontology of what you would like to build or design, from my perspective, you'll always want to do basically a workshop structure to involve more people, to get, first of all, them to understand what you want to design, but also to agree on kind of the fundamental challenges and solutions that you will be building. Again, this is quite different for any stage. And in this case, this is, I don't know how many of you are familiar with it. I wanted to kind of show and highlight the Lean Canvas, which is a framework that's very, very useful if you don't have any concept yet, but you kind of want it to become a product. And the Lean Canvas is not just useful to create a business. It's generally good to get a really good understanding, or like a solid understanding of how you create value and how your how the people you create value for also potentially receive it, and through which channels. And I think so, like, I want to kind of start this off with a little intermission workshop. So I'll post a link to a Miro board in the chat. This is, oh, it's disabled. No.
If you, here we go. It's now re-enabled for a momentary basis. We're chitter chattering in the track build Slack channel. So I'm going to drop it there as well. And Andre, if there's any questions along the way, I'll mention that.
Cool, great. I'll also keep my Slack open then, just in case. Cool. So this is the Miro board, and I just want to kind of invite you to basically, let me just like get you also my thing, bring everyone to me. Way there. So I just want to get you a little bit familiarized with what it's good for and how it works. So what you see here is like basically a linear structure for how I would do a workshop on just basically ideating a couple of challenges and then coming up with solutions. And the idea behind it is that you just you deconstruct your own creative process and involve a lot of other people into it, so that you always come to the same end, like the same result, but at a much higher quality because you involve more people, but in the same amount of time. And so because I want to give you this example, let's just kind of go through this real quick in a few minutes. So we'll basically start off with just writing down any, yeah, sorry, a couple of these things are probably movable. It's very difficult to control it. There's like 200 people on it, and some stuff's already moving on. So on the very first, what do you call it, a frame, I'm just going to bring everyone to me. There we go. Let's just brainstorm any challenge you particularly find within your team or within your product, as something that you would like to work on, or something you would like to kind of solve, or something you just got stuck on, and you don't know a solution for. And I'll set a timer on like, let's do 3 minutes, and just write out as many as you can. And this is also important if you do workshops. Try and not go for the highest quality, but rather a quantity of solutions. So take one of these red post-its on the top left, duplicate it. If you're not familiar with Miro, Command C, Command V, or Command D for duplicating it, or just like Command and drag. Replace Command with Control if you have a Windows machine.
Two quick things, Andre. One, I'm not sure if you're wanting to share the Miro on your own screen. It still has the up to you. And then everyone's creating sticky notes right now in the same board. It's also super chill as you see all of these people moving around. If you make a copy of it, I know, Andre, we tried that last time. Do we want to try that again?
I mean, if you have a team, you can certainly copy the first frame. I think it's actually going to make things a little bit more complicated.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
So I would actually recommend. Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I would just say let's do this real quick with everybody, and then once you have an idea of how it looks, I'll send you the template, and then you can do it with your own team in entirety, because there are a couple more kind of slides that will explain a bit more, if that makes sense.
It's perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. So let's just start with the very first one. So thanks a lot for duplicating all of these 15 billion post-its. I'll set a timer on 3 minutes, and in these 3 minutes, please just write out as many challenges as you can think of. Sorry, I'm bringing everybody to me every now and then because I see the cursor floating all over the place. But 3 minutes, it's a bit of time pressure, but that's good. Just take a post-it and write something on that is currently kind of a blocker for your product or your prototype, or the stage of where you're at with the idea that you have. I'm gonna try and see if I can share my computer sound too. How does this work? Oh yeah, here. It's gonna put on some music. I normally do music during workshops. Not like as a DJ, more like as a background music. Makes it a little bit more pleasant. So there you go. It's a nice app. It auto-generates music. I don't know why it's not playing yet. We'll do it in a second. Oh yeah, so sometimes it happens that these things just copy paste. And again, it doesn't have to be a right, it doesn't have to be a wrong, because there is no right or wrong. It's just about whatever you can think of. It's personally relevant. Yeah, if your computer slows down, you can go here on the cursor and just unclick it, or like unclick it, and then stop showing everybody else. It becomes a little bit more neat. Okay, cool. So just because we don't have a lot of time, or yeah, because we're time capped, I'm gonna stop here. And it also looks pretty awesome already. So like, imagine all of these things came from your team. We're just gonna imagine we're all one team of 54 individuals that are all fighting for this, building the same product. But essentially the structure is the same if you do it in a smaller scale. Just I would put on the timer on like 10 minutes or so, then you have some more ideas, but still time cap it. And from here, let's just do a round of voting. So I normally use Miro and vote with these blue circles on the top right. Let me just kind of move those around and duplicate them a little bit. So take those and everybody use 2 dots and vote on your, let's say 3 dots, and vote on the things that resonate with you the most. And again, you can read through other ones, and you have 3 minutes. After those 3 minutes, we'll look at what has bubbled up, and we'll see what everybody finds useful and important about this. It also actually gives us quite an interesting indication of what's the average stage here among all the participants, and what are important questions to work on. So I'll probably use that to address them next time in the workshop next week. You can also draw lines, yes. Yeah, exactly. So like the problems that you resonate the most with. Exactly, yeah. Thanks, Vivek. Does look a lot less busy that way.
हेलो, इंस्टाक से बात कर रहे हैं? सर मैं चंडीगढ़ से बात कर रहा हूँ, सैटरडे 3 से।
You mind? I'll meet Rohan. Got it.
Was it from Chandigarh?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think the largest amount of people I had in a client workshop was like 14 people, which is also quite a lot. And but it works, and as long as the structure is the same, it's quite nice. Cool. So from here, and I'm just going to give you kind of an example. This is an example for what a workshop could look like, and I'll give you some more frameworks on how to replicate them on your own later, because I also want to talk about prototyping a little bit. but I have a lot of write-ups on different structures and different kind of protocols for workshops. So I'm just going to take like one or two of the ones with the highest votes. So we have actually like an incentive structure design. We have Web3 system architecture tools to upskill from Web2. Not enough devs. I think these have like the highest amount of votes. Let me just take these two. And or actually there's one on the bottom, usability of blockchain, non-technical participants, compensating collaborators without funding. Oh yeah, these are interesting. Make the onboarding experience as smooth as possible. Okay, let's actually take that one because that's the easiest to answer, and I think that also has the most votes. So from here, what I would normally do is use an exercise. It's not really an exercise. By the way, I don't know why I have red lines and they just don't go away anymore. That's
interesting.
That's just a thing to live with, I guess. So
maybe refresh because I don't see that online. But yeah.
Oh no. Okay. Then that's just me. Okay.
Oh, I know where that is. No. I got it.
Oh, that's in Zoom, right?
It's
oh yeah. Okay.
Zoom. Hold on.
That makes sense. Okay. It's fine. I don't mind too much. Oh yeah, there. Cool. Thanks. All right. So so from here, once your team has like written up a couple of challenges, you want to rephrase them into something that sounds like a solvable challenge. And I use kind of a how might we statement for this. So actually, yeah, normally you would kind of list them all into this next screen and then prioritize them so it looks like a kind of like a tree like this, like a hierarchy with highest votes on the top and then lower on the bottom. And then here we just take that one and rephrase that into a how might we statement. And the how might we is basically just like a different way to phrase the challenge into something that sounds more solvable. And let's just do this real quick. How might we make the onboarding as smooth as possible? And again, this is just like a linguistic hack, I guess, but it helps in the next stage when we want to actually come up with solutions to think about anything that could be a good solution. Now you could do that later if you want together. I think just because we're running out of time, I'd rather keep going with the slides because there's millions of other things that I want to talk to you about. But for this, just basically you would do exactly the same process of like getting everybody, giving everybody like 5 to 7 minutes and just write out as many solutions as you can to this particular problem. And then that way you'll have a really wide range of like really different perspectives from everybody's expertise. And this is important if you have a cross-functional team, or this is important why to have a cross-functional team, because everybody gets to contribute from their own perspective. And everybody writes out kind of what they think is right. And then you vote and combine and get the best ideas from everybody, and relatively in a relatively short amount of time. So just before I close this up, there are a lot of other ways that you can utilize this structure, this collaborative structure for. So I mentioned before the business model canvas, the lean canvas. So you can basically do exactly the same for each stage here, and you'll end up with a collective kind of systems thinking approach to what your kind of business structure should be like. You'll then here, when you have a solution, you can put that together on an effort impact scale and see which of these solutions that you came up with are actually kind of the most easiest to work with, and people would love to kind of work from, or like basically take an action on, and then you can delegate them. But there's also a lot of other things, like you can do any kind of like user journey maps, any type of models that you would basically, if you're an engineer, for instance, you want to do some data models, for instance, or like some entity relationship models. So these things can all be done in this collaborative sense by involving everybody, and that helps to get everybody on the team to align.
Yeah, I just want to chime in. I think that the team-oriented ideas here are really important because there are groups of like 2 to 3, maybe max like 5 to 7 people who are working on adventures together in kernel. This process can be a really enjoyable individual one too. And I know that that's just like a perspective to keep in mind, Andre, that we have probably maybe 20 to 30 people who, actually probably more, who are kind of like exploring ideas at the earliest of stages and can go through this from that perspective as well.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, this is not just for teams, like it just takes the same amount of time. I think if you're an individual, you should also go through these yourself, like just use the limitations, the time limitations to come through and kind of brainstorm as much as possible really quickly, and you come up with a lot of different ideas yourself. So yeah, and as you can see here, like there's millions of different ways you can utilize it. You can write user journeys. This is just a general kind of structure, for a creative structure for a prototype. And this is where we kind of go slowly into the prototyping phase, because when you actually design something yourself, you want to go through kind of getting focused on what you want to build, write a user journey, do some research and find some other examples of similar products, sketch something on paper, sketch it so it like looks like the real thing. And yeah, I mean, these are kind of the same if you're an individual, but if you're doing it collaboratively, everybody just sketches their own thing, and then you vote on them the same way with these dots, and then you combine them into a storyboard that captures like the entire, almost like wireframe for what you want to design. And from there, it's really kind of a combination of a lot of things. So I think one thing I should mention here, after you've done kind of this ideation process, this kind of fundamental work that's required to get to this wireframe, it's actually relatively easy to move forward, because the only thing you need by then is just to kind of make it look nice and put it in a presentable way. And I would usually always try and make it look as real as possible, because you want to prepare it to show it to people who have never seen it before. And keep in mind that it's completely fine to, steal ideas from other places. Like this was an example from PancakeSwap. Like we designed a bit in PancakeSwap that's like just stealing ideas from existing thing in a kind of from the visual perspective, and trying to repurpose them into something that works. So you can see here the kind of Uniswap inspiration that did not come from us. They did that. Or like specific kind of items from MetaMask, like a button from WhatsApp, and kind of describing a very complicated way to progress through different ways of throwing your money out, essentially, like you would use Duolingo. And I kind of like this idea of forking designs, and a quote that has stuck with me since like for a long time is from a filmmaker who's like basically a very influential filmmaker. It's not where you take things from, it's where you take them to. So like, don't worry about where you steal ideas from. It's more important that you repurpose them into something that's yours and uniquely yours, and kind of put the thought in it.
Andre, a couple of great things from the chat. Carmen mentions proto.io to create things that look like the real thing. I'm not sure if you've seen that, but that seems like a really awesome thing for people to check out. And then Dhruv asks a question about if you can share the links of like a template marketplace, maybe somewhere where we can import different previous examples of good quality projects. Does that type of thing exist? Yeah. So
I wanted to, here. This is something that I've been kind of working on with Deepwork, but essentially, I kind of encourage you to look through these, and these are all projects we have worked on, and there was a lot of negotiation going into making this possible, but essentially we're open sourcing any type of design that we work on. So with any team that works with us, we basically work with them and design them everything that they need particularly. You can just, let me see what's the nice one.
That's incredible. Cool. That's incredible that you went through that negotiation process. The fact that design is being as open source as code in Web3 is a huge win. Super cool.
Yeah, so there's all of the files that are here. So like the whiteboards, the prototype designs, the user testing feedback, like the interview scripts, exactly the questions that have been asked. Thanks for sharing. And the summary as well of the user feedback. So I would say, yeah, and you can also obviously try the prototypes, but I think also more valuable for you will be these links where you can just copy paste and steal all of it and create your own mix of designs. And I think, yeah, when you do that, yeah, I think if you have the prototype, you can go here and then open an editor, and then it opens up the working file. So I would recommend that if you go through these kind of case studies, yeah, thanks, Adrian. If you go through these case studies, try to make sure that whatever you're trying to steal, you can also match up with the user feedback that we received, because some of these things are really like replicated in how people reacted to them, and a lot of design changes along the way after you get feedback. And so here you have, like, for instance, different iterations. This is the first iteration of like a screen of the prototype, and then we had a second iteration which already like looks a bit different, visualizes things differently based on the user feedback, obviously, and has some more information. So take that all take that all into consideration. But yeah, there's a lot to read through.
Yeah, because you've worked on a lot, Andre. truly. Yeah, Chibu's got it right.
It's also not just me, so it's a lot of really good product designers and facilitators and user researchers, and maybe in the future you, if you're interested.
Yeah.
So let me just see. There's a couple more things. How are you all considering accessibility with those iterations? Yeah, all based on user feedback. So like depends on what the target audience is. You'll see what breaks and what doesn't work, and that way you improve basically for the niche or for the target segment or the customer segment you're designing for. And on that same note, when you're prototyping, make sure that the fidelity of the prototype actually follows the purpose of the test. So you don't have to make it look like insanely nice, or you don't have to kind of use animations or illustrations. I actually advise most teams that I work with to not put up any video explainers or anything, because it costs a lot of time and money to create those. And the message is like, you could kind of describe the same thing in a few words, or in like a couple of pictures, because only when you understand that people react to it, they understand what you're talking about, then it makes sense to go a step further and increase the fidelity and make it better. Are you considering web-based web content accessibility guidelines in design? Oh, okay. I guess that question is more related to accessibility guidelines. Well, definitely. Like it's hard to answer. I think like normally we just design them based on the best UX capabilities we have, and obviously we follow certain guidelines, but you also have to always see them in context to what you're building, because certain accessibility tools will create more friction for other people. So this is, for instance, another example for a prototype that's a bit higher fidelity, because the whole thing was also relatively complex. It's basically like a decentralized cloud service provider. And we do show, so here, yeah, we have like animations and stuff, because that was kind of the fidelity that was necessary to make people understand the complexity of the whole thing. But yeah, like don't try to spend too many resources and too much time on making it super polished. So like these are examples. This is, for instance, the deposit ceremony for, that was what it's called before, the ETH2 launchpad, where you stake 32 ETH. That was very simple. So like it was basically just like an outline of screen, like of content with some warnings and kind of making sure that the flow works well. Same with DHedge. That was like after a week approximately. Like, I mean, the prototyping took like 2 or 3 days, but half days, not that long. Yeah, so essentially, I think, yeah, this is the last slide. Let me actually go through the questions because I think there was much more that than I was able to answer.
You mean,
yeah, sorry.
do you mean in the chat? Let me pause this here.
Yeah.
Anything else in the Miro, Andre? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, in the Miro we can just go as much as we want. So like it's quite a lot to work with.
Sure. Let me. Yeah. What I'll suggest is take a look at the Miro on your own time. My hope is that we give some time back today. And if we do give that time back, let's say we finish in the next 10 minutes or so, just look at the part on the left side of each one of these sessions. And it genuinely walks you through the process of getting, basically the hope is a prototype at the end of this that you can feel good about and share with others.
Yeah, I think actually, if you want to do a prototype, here's what I would recommend. I don't know if you have a team or you don't. It doesn't really matter for this. But try to start with a user journey, and okay, that doesn't work. Anyway, so use this one, which is a frame for a user journey. It's kind of a workshop frame, but try to come up with 6 steps that you want your user to go through from start. And the start can be something, or should be actually something that's outside of your product. So, you know, use a tweet or like, I don't know, an email or a direct message as the very first step. And then come up with like a few steps from start to finish, and finish being like where you want the user to be. So let's see, here we have like, I think that was probably even, I don't even remember what that was. Selected to committee. Oh yeah, that was for the ETH validator. Okay, so you would actually start one step beforehand, where you're like on Twitter, you read a tweet, and then that leads you to the launchpad. You create a wallet or create a new ETH wallet, and so on, and you end up with seeing a reward, earned a reward by proposing and testing a valid block. So all of these things in the middle is what you want to focus on when you want to prototype your experience. So you start with one thing and end with the goal of your project. And then from there, you just sketch out ideas of what you think would be a reasonable way to prototype it. So either you do something like this when you actually sketch things on paper. So like, you know, create sketches. Or you can use things like actual already existing no-code tools. Like I'm a big fan of creating no-code tools. And let me see. So the way that Deepwork works internally, we don't have a software, we don't have a tool, but this was like my user journey for the kind of organizational structure to kind of involve freelancers into the way that we design projects. And so you see here the actors, which is the clients. We have a role for the creative director. We have experts. And then first of all these steps are just like from beginning to end. This is one project. So the experts would set off their times when they're unavailable. Then they get a request for availability. And then they go through all these things until the project is finished, and they do a retrospective and receive a payment. And you like, obviously you can only go to a very specific detail, but try to not spend too much time on it. But you can use that already then to put together some kind of framework that's prototyping it on like existing tools that you don't necessarily need to design or build, but you can test, because then you'll get actual data from actual users or actual people who might potentially use your idea or your product. And that's essentially what you want, because you want to figure out whether what you're coming up with is going to be valuable or not, or like, is it going to be something that other people also want? or not, because if they do, they will also probably fuel the whole business model behind it in the future when you want this thing to be more self-sustainable. And yeah, you can so go into as much detail as you want. My recommendation is to like keep the prototype as simple as possible, because you want to iterate fast, and yeah, spending too much time will hinder you with it.
Definitely. Cool. And Andre, thank you so much for this, because this gets us to like the main message of today, which is that you have an adventure, you know, no one's going to push you down this path if you're not interested in it. But if you want to build a prototype and get it in front of somebody this week, we can do that. And I don't know if Andre, you were the one who pulled up that slide, but if you can go back to the like to do of how you sign up for kernel cross feedback.
Oh yeah, right. Yes, there it is. Hold on, there.
Yeah. So the way that this is going to work is, the hope is that this session gives you some sense of how to get from idea to prototype. If you are interested in building that prototype, and it literally can be pen and paper all the way up to like higher levels of fidelity if you already have a prototype that you're playing with. It could be a feature if you're further along in the process, as opposed to like the full idea for something new. But regardless, if you have something that you want to share, you can sign up for what we're calling cross feedback. We're taking suggestions on better names, but the way that this works is very simple. It's an hour, you're basically signing up for being willing to do an hour session, where in the session, you share your prototype with somebody who we think would be a good user for what it is that you're building. And then you see somebody else's prototype and give them feedback as a potential user of what they're building. So in that hour, you play both roles. Our instincts is that it will also be simply a good conversation, and that it'll be a good way to see just like how that feels to share your prototype with somebody who's trusted, who's in the space that you are in at this point. Also recognizing that next week's session with Andre is kind of the real user testing session. So this is kind of like getting ahead of the syllabus in some sense, where you this week could share your prototype, just kind of have like a casual session where you're testing for the things that you want, exploring your prototype. And then by next session, which will be, I think next Wednesday is what we're aiming for, something like that. And we'll put it on the calendars. You'll get like kind of the real rundown from Andre, and like, okay, this is like the nitty gritty of how to do like a user test. Maybe you'll have already gotten some practice in by then, and you're working from a stage one. So our hope is that a bunch of people sign up for this, go to the kernel office hours channel in Slack. And Sachin, I think, is going to put this in the build channel again, but we already see Max Glass actually has already filled this out. So I can probably just share my screen to show really quick in the live version. You put in here your adventure. If you have someone in mind, you put Deepwork there, and then you can put your Calendly link, which will just help us schedule out the flow. So our hope is that we see more people put these requests in. We will try to do the job of tagging the right people to pair up. But if you see someone who are like, well, hey, I would like to pair up with you, maybe just like do so on the threads. We can kind of figure it out together. But yeah, that's the flow there. Any questions on that flow from anyone? Okay, cool.
There's a lot of questions in the chat. I think I don't know. We probably don't have time, right? It's probably better if you just put them in Slack, right?
Let me say this. Yeah, if you feel like if you don't have any questions on the flow and you feel good about the prototyping, I think you're welcome to go. You can maybe spend your 15 minutes working on the prototype. So please don't feel like you have to stick around from here. Maybe Andre, we do have 15 minutes. You can take the Q&A for the people who are interested in staying for the Q&A section.
Yeah, I'm good for another 15 minutes. Happy to go through some stuff.
Great. Thanks to everyone who's ending up dropping. I know there'll be a clubhouse that N is hosting just to kind of like hang out after. So feel free to check that out, and then we'll just hang out here for whoever wants to.
Cool. Thanks everyone who is leaving, and for everybody else. Thanks for your time.
Andre, brother.
There's just so much I can talk about. It's pretty hard to distill it down, but I think this generally makes sense. So from what I understand, essentially, yeah, you want to just create any type of prototype. Actually, one thing that I wanted to say as well is that these workshops are actually pretty good as well to figure out the right questions you want to ask. And these are the questions that you will probably answer with your prototype when you do user testing. So when you define on what your user journey is, try and figure out what things stand out as being unclear or that you're unsure about, and write them down, because that's something when we go through the user interview, user testing workshop next week, that's something that you want to utilize in your testing script and kind of look at, refer to, and try and assume or like try to elicit the information from the testers. Now, I don't know exactly, let me just see if there's anything from the chat that I can pick up on. Otherwise, feel free to, there's still quite a lot of people here. Feel free to write your question in the chat, right? Or like Paulo has raised his hand, maybe you can just say, and then everybody else just write your question in the chat and I'll answer that way.
Cool. Paulo, take it away.
Okay, I need to answer if the process of the cross feedback, it's important to talk to only one people, or we can talk to more people just to understand more, because I have a vague idea about a product, so I need to understand more more ideas, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very good question. I'll also go deeper into that next week, but generally try and kind of take an idea at a step or at a time, and try to make your, first of all, try to make your idea as tangible as you can so that other people understand it without you having to explain too much. And then you show that one thing to like about 5 people, maybe that's going to be enough, who you think might potentially see value in that idea or that concept. Fewer than 5 is going to be tricky because you might have 2 different feedback. More than 5, you'll just basically statistically see a lot of overlaps already. And these are going to be enough to keep you busy for the next iteration.
Yeah, so this first cross feedback is just the first. With that first prototype, the hope is 2 to 3 more people in the next week, we will get you into the flow, but this is just getting ahead of it.
Yeah. What's your stance on wireframing versus prototyping? Yeah, also good question. Thanks, Ravi. I mean, I did wireframes about 6 years ago for the last time. And I kind of, and okay, maybe there's one time where I tried wireframes, but the problem with wireframes is that they're not communicating everything. They're communicating kind of the basics for the for your idea for only a designer. So if you want to hand off to a designer who should like, you know, create the thing and like make it look pretty, that's probably where wireframes are useful. But you don't want to test with wireframes because the mental load or mental effort it takes for people to actually imagine what it would look like in reality is way too high compared to the actual output that you would get. So try to make it like as real as you can at the fidelity that you can afford. So wireframes is probably a bit too like, yeah, I would, rather than wireframes, I would probably use no-code tools, like a mixture of those, because you want to figure out like whether what you're thinking of actually is valuable.
I love that idea on no code.
What about like testing out things like user flows and business logic? Because the thing is, like, one of the things that I've seen with some people that we tested with is if your visuals are eye-catching, then they kind of sometimes divert away from the question, which is to streamline user flow, or just some basic idea of business logic. Yeah, so I guess maybe it's a situational thing potentially. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess business logic you can't really try out, I would say, because or like, I mean, you can, but then it has to be more or less live. Like it's like selling something, trying whether you can sell something you can only do by actually selling it. And I think if you're thinking of like trying out user flows in themselves, it sounds to me like kind of or like I would say my approach is the other way around. So I would create an environment that I'm sure of that covers the basic needs of the users or like a product, and I will observe what exactly is which user flows emerge from there. So let's say I have a Discord and I have a community, and there's like projects signing up and like freelancers looking for work. I would really closely try to observe what they write and how they message each other, and which steps they go through from being outside of our Discord to actually working on a project. Like what is happening there, and that basically gives you the idea for a user journey, and that's then something that you want to kind of capture in your brain as an ontology and then put it on paper as a user flow or data model or business model. And then again, you're going through the same step or like same process again. You use like no code tools, or actually kind of you yourself would follow through that structure. These like kind of you extrapolate yourself, design it a little bit, and then you go back in, and then you go step by step, like what do I do in this flow? And you kind of test it yourself, like go sales call, whatever, like this is the number, this is what I present, now let's do the work. And yeah, so I hope that answers your question. I'm not 100% sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Maybe keep rolling. Anyone else want to unmute? We have 5 minutes left.
Yeah, Zari Barber here. Quick question. So I'm kind of in the process of idea validation. And I think for me, maybe trying to work through a prototype with someone quickly initially could be helpful with that to find holes or problems. Does that make sense of a good combination?
Yeah, definitely. And please do fill out the kernel office hours flow. We'll get you paired up with somebody, Zori.
Cool. I'm doing it right now. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, exactly. If you have something that is, so yeah, I guess my approach to this is also, once I have something that I think other people could understand without me having to explain it, like just try and get it in front of people as quickly as possible. Just strangers, but those who can kind of give you feedback. Nice strangers. Not just like the guy on the street.
There are nice strangers in the world. We've met some in kernel and made them not strangers anyway.
Yeah, no, kernel is great.
Yeah, you essentially have 200 people to test with here, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah. Use these opportunities as well, because everybody's thinking along the same lines and very understanding, and can probably will give extra effort to give you good feedback. So that's also rare. So like when you have when you're actually looking for user testers, and go through that next time as well, it requires a bit of work to get people who can answer questions truthfully.
We have one from RV in the chat, but I want to check if there's any other people who want to unmute with any questions. Okay. If not,
Sure.
then
I might have one, Vivek. So I think, thank you again, Andre, for this, and thank you everybody at Kernel for organizing this. Just one small question. At what point do you determine when is the time to stop designing so you don't over design, and you can find the minimal viable product essentially from a design perspective? When do you stop over designing and start to building to then get the feedback so that you can iterate back over it?
Good question. I would say after, so I would try to design the MVP to the bare minimum. So to give you an example, we just limit ourselves to 3 days. So, and these 3 days are more like for expert designers, and they take into consideration visual. So I would say probably also like, yeah, just if you have 3 days, 2 to 4 hours each day you can spend on it, design it to that point, and then user test it. And I would generally advise, like, because there's no real number that I can tell you, or like there's no real like how would you call it, like quantified answer to know exactly when it's ready. I would try to optimize for keeping the iteration loop as short as possible. So the more often you can do iterations, the better your design will be. So over designing means that you've been working on it for like, I don't know, 2 weeks or so, and it already looks nice, but nobody has ever seen it yet.
Yeah, there are some numbers that Andre has shared that really have stuck for me. And I think the intuition is like, there's 2 parts of like deep conversation. So the first one was like this idea that you should really do these one-on-one. You really don't need like 5 people in a room. It actually is counterproductive, and you can have a deep, meaningful conversation in a way that actually gets the prototype to a better place. And then the other one was the 5 number. You really don't need more than 5 of these sessions. And so if you can do those within a 2 to 3 day time period, it gives you that sense of momentum, right? That you've gone from A to B, and after those 5, if you're not coming up with a new prototype to share with the next group of 5, then maybe something has gone wrong.
Yeah, and yeah, I think 5 is always a good like for user testers, and yeah, for design, again, try to figure out from when you're getting. Let me just think what's a good example, because yeah, try and figure out when you start having anxiety to show it to other people. That's the right time, because that's also the time when you start over designing, because you're escape from facing the truth.
Yep. Okay, 2 quick fire ones, Andre. Is there a clear separation from UX feedback sessions and general user interviews? Is it bad to merge into one?
Yes. Try and so yeah. Good question. UX feedback is normally related to kind of the usability, because that's more like, are the buttons right, like aligned correctly? Does everybody read the right copy? Is everybody like, do people go through the experience you want them to go through? Like, that's the UX test. Normally, or like I would say, if you're a good designer, or if you have a good designer, they do that by default because they've been through that iteration a long time. So if you're not a good designer, but you want to be a good designer, do that thing, the loop, and focus on only that, because it will distract you from the other type of feedback. Like I guess you can do both at the same time, but you want to be clear about what the feedback is. Like, you need to elicit what people actually talk about, and because humans are difficult and complicated, they will say things that they don't believe themselves. It's just more difficult to kind of separate these things. So people will say like, hey, I really love this design, and you'll be like, oh, cool, thanks. And then later you realize, why did they actually say that? Like, what exactly did they like about it? Because I'm not super happy with it. And like, is it what it looks like? Is it the experience? Is it the value? So people are gonna mix things up. And general user interviews are more about like trying to figure out where the value is, and like try and focus on, is the product that you're designing actually relevant for their lives? And when they have friction in UX, in the experience, it will be harder for them to imagine it in their life. So it's kind of an important. So I guess yeah, I try to get the UX as right as I can in order to not distract them from the actual value. This goes along the same lines of like making it look real, or as real as possible. Okay, sorry, that was a very long answer. Maybe one real quick one.
I think we
Or should we
might
stop? Okay,
be good to hold now. But Andre, no, thank you so much. And everyone who's stayed for Q&A, thank you for your questions. Next session is next week. I think we're going to schedule it for Wednesday. And in the meantime, good luck with your prototypes. We're excited to see them, excited to share them in small groups to get them from idea to the next stage. Thanks so much again, Andre, for
Thanks to
being here.
you, and yeah,
Thank
this
you,
is
Vic.
really exciting.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Andre.
Andre.
Okay.
Cool.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy your day.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I
Bye-bye.
won't stop the recording for this last part.
Thank you, Andre. Everyone on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you.
I thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.